It through chapter 3 last week, but we had one last thing that I wanted to share with you. And so because of that, you always have to set the stage, right? You have to sort of talk about where we were because it's been a week. And as sometimes we say at work, I've slept some since we talked about that. And so things start seeping out of our minds. And even as, we'll get into that topic this morning as we think about forgetting things as we talk about memorials in chapter 4. So that'll be an interesting topic as well. But last week we were in chapter 3, and the whole idea there was about crossing the Jordan and the great miracle that occurred as the children of Israel crossed the Jordan. We broke it up into 3 sections, and we talked about in verses 1 through 8 that preparations were being made, that Joshua moved the people to the banks of the Jordan. He communicated a plan for crossing the Jordan, what the priest would do, what the people would do, and then he told the people to consecrate themselves. We're going to come back to that word in just a moment. And then in verses 9 through 13, instructions were given. Joshua told the people that this miracle of holding back the waters would show to them that now if God can do this, he certainly can defeat those who they're about to come in contact with as they take over the land that's been promised to them. Joshua told them exactly when the miracle would occur. And we talked a lot about how this event was very close to or bore some similarities to the crossing of the Red Sea. And then finally, at the end of the chapter, verses 14 through 17, we talked about the crossing of the Jordan. It occurred just as Joshua predicted. The waters stood up far away from where the children crossed. The ground was dry. And remember that this event was occurring at the time when the Jordan was highest. It was overflowing its banks. It was at the time of the harvest. So it was the most impressive version of this miracle that could have happened at the Jordan River. And so that sort of took us through chapter 3. We talked about a couple of applications. We talked about learning from Joshua's leadership and a lot of the good things that he did as a leader. We talked about trying to have the same kind of confidence that Joshua has, that he's a great example as he exhibited his faith in God to the people. And then the last application we talked about is that we need to continue to appreciate the power of God. Now, this is something that maybe they were susceptible to back then because they saw maybe multiple miracles over the course of their lives. It wasn't necessarily like miracles were occurring every day, but they certainly had heard about the crossing of the Red Sea. They knew about the provisions that were given to them in the wilderness. They saw miracles. We can read about a lot of miracles, but we never need to take for granted the power of God. When he shows the power that he has, it should never become old hat. This was an amazing thing that bolstered the faith of the people. And when we read about those things, we have the whole course of biblical history here to read about those things, and that should bolster our faith as well. Okay, so the one thing that we didn't get a chance to explore in chapter 3 is the idea that when Joshua told the people, go back and consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow they're going to cross the Jordan. I want to talk about that as sort of the last topic in chapter 3. So I want to give you an illustration that maybe it'll help you. It always helps me to have something to put in mind in relation to a word like this, like consecration. Have you ever walked into your house either as a kid or as an adult, and your wife or your mom had cooked something that was one of your favorites, right? It creates this mental image in your mind. And I want you to just think about this for yourself for just a second. So Millie makes popcorn sometimes, and it's not Jiffy Pop and it's not microwave stuff. This is serious business popcorn, right? You put it on the stove, and she's got all the plans of the salt and where, when it goes in the oil and all that. You don't just salt it on top. It's an impressive thing. She's told me that she can teach me how to do this, but I don't want to learn because she does it. So, but it's really good. And so when I walk in the house and I smell popcorn, I know there's a treat there. Millie and my mom both made brownies, right? And you walk in and you smell them and you think, oh man, I hope there's some ice cream in the freezer, right? To cut the sweet out of that brownie, because this is going to be good stuff. And I think about back to when I was a kid, I walk in to the house and I smell salmon patties, right? Now there's a difference between salmon and salmon. Now you senior saints, y'all are going down to Winsel's today. If you want to order a piece of salmon, they'll bring you out a nice fillet with some seasoning on top. But if it comes in a red can with a fish jumping out of the water, that's salmon, all right? And so, I'm a simple man. I'll take salmon all day long, fried up, dipping in some ketchup with some stewed potatoes beside it. That's fine eating right there. And, if y'all could produce a plate of those for my mom, I'd give you $100 right now because that's good stuff. So you say, all right, well, enough talk about the food. What's your point? And so my point is, what if you walked in and you smelled one of those things and you put your thing in there and you're thinking, man, I am fixing to get some of that. And you hear the line, don't touch that. That food is for blank. And you fill in the blank. Maybe it's for the fellowship meal tomorrow. Maybe it's to take over to somebody's house. Maybe we're going out somewhere and we're going to take that. Don't eat that. That food is for something else. So your heart sinks a little bit. So that food was set aside. It had a different purpose. And you had to, you were disappointed because the purpose was not necessarily for you, at least at that point in time, but it was dedicated to another cause. And so I think we probably all dealt with those, right? That mom or your wife or somebody was cooking for an event, and that food had a special dedication. So hopefully when you think about that illustration, you'll think about this word consecration. Because to be consecrated means to be set aside, to be set apart, to be dedicated for a special cause. So in chapter 3, Joshua is getting ready to cross the Jordan, and the people are told to prepare themselves, to consecrate themselves, because tomorrow is going to be a big day. So obviously the people knew what that meant because they went back and they started consecrating themselves, right? We don't see any record that they were asking, well, what do you mean by that? So we don't know exactly what their act of consecration was, but it's possible that it was something similar to what Moses told the people to do in Exodus 19. If you want to flip over there, let's read a couple of verses out of Exodus chapter 19. I'll start in verse 10. Exodus 19. When Moses told the words of the people to the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments and be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people, and you shall set limits for the people all around, saying, take care not to go up into the mountain or to touch the edge of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall be stoned or shot. Whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain." So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, "Be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman." So perhaps it was something similar to this. Perhaps they were supposed to go and maybe ceremonially wash their garments, an outward sign of the fact that they were purifying themselves to be, as we talked about in chapter 3, in the presence of God as they were going through the Jordan River. Maybe they were, as Moses mentioned here in Exodus chapter 19, maybe they were to abstain from marital relations. Maybe there were other things. But they were to be spiritually and physically set apart to be focused on God. So my question for you to think about as we sort of close this idea of what consecration is I'd like to ask you, what do you think consecration might look like for us today? And are there times when we should stop and consecrate ourselves? It appears that the intent here is to be set aside for God's purpose, to take away all the trappings and all the distractions of daily life so that we can wholeheartedly seek God be open to all of the things that He's prepared to do for us. So if we're going to do this, for us, it probably has to do with more than taking a bath or washing our clothes. If we're going to consecrate ourselves, we need to remove ourselves from the world, from the distractions that keep me from seeing God at work around me. It could be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So what might it mean to us in this day and age? Well, does it mean, what they were saying, that we abstain from marital relations for some period of time? Maybe that has, maybe it's that kind of thing of the focus, because why otherwise would 1 Corinthians 7:5 say, do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer. So there is some taking of ourselves away from all the trappings of this life to focus ourselves. Does it mean some kind of fasting, maybe changing our diet so that we can, be clean mentally and spiritually? It can mean that kind of thing, absolutely. It might mean that we refrain from a lot of the things that eat up our time. Maybe if we're going to consecrate ourselves, maybe we refrain from television for some period of time, or media, or movies, or all the things that just are time eaters. But consecration is not just about stopping something that we do that might not be evil in and of itself, but it might be a time consumer. When you're talking about consecration, it needs to have two parts to it, right? Which is stopping something and then dedicating ourselves to God. And so an example might be, for this period of time, I'm going to stop the time that I spend watching television, and I'm going to use it for Bible study and prayer. And so that would be sort of these two components. So ultimately, the what is not as important as the why. If we choose to remove ourselves and consecrate ourselves, we want to devote our time spent for that thing in the pursuit of God. And of course, it bears always saying that when we do something like this, we don't do this to be seen of men. Jesus was very clear about that. He mentioned that when the Pharisees and Sadducees fasted, they put on sackcloth and ashes so that everyone could see what they were doing. So if we're doing anything like this for the purpose of setting ourselves aside for God, and we're trying to do that to be thought of as some kind of spiritual superstar or something like that, God tells us that you have your reward already. Instead, Jesus tells us to go into private and do our acts of righteousness for God alone. So let's consider this passage in Joshua chapter 3 one last time. Verse 5, Joshua said to the people, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." So why do we consecrate ourselves? It's not so that God will do things for us. God is not a spiritual vending machine where we do things and then in return we get things in return. But rather, in this verse tells us, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Why would we do something like consecrating ourselves and the kinds of things that we've talked about as examples here? It's so that we can be prepared to better see what God is doing for us, the doors that He's opening for us, and that we might be able to take advantage of those things with our friends, our family, those around us. So I just want you to think more, and I didn't want to leave chapter 3 without at least a moment to throw out that idea about consecration. Now we're ready to move into Joshua chapter 4, and we're going to talk about the topic memorial stones in Joshua chapter 4. God doesn't want us to forget the many ways that we've been blessed by Him. James 1:17 shares this idea when it says, "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change." We never need to begin to think differently than what that verse says, that we're the source or we're the cause of the good things we enjoy in life. God's word tells us different than that. Psalm 103, the first two verses there say, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless His holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits." Acts 17:25 declares that we serve a God who gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And because God knows us, he provides us with tangible reminders of his goodness. He's given us the world that we live in, wonderful and intricate, and all the things that we get to see every day. Paul shared that point in Acts 14:17. Yet he did not leave himself without witness, for he did good by giving you rains from heaven and fruitful seasons, satisfying your hearts with food and gladness. All the things around us are examples and proofs of the existence of God. In addition to revealing himself in nature, God has also provided us reminders of the many ways that he blessed humanity in Scripture. Throughout the pages of Scripture, we learn what God has done for people in the past, what he's done by sending Jesus to die in our place, and how God remains willing to hear our prayers and to take care of us through his providence. And we also learn about some specific reminders God has ordained in order to keep us from forgetting what he's done. And for us today, chief among those is the establishment of the Lord's Supper. Let's read 1 Corinthians 11, verses 24 and 25. If we want to flip over there, 1 Corinthians 11. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way also he took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." According to Jesus, we partake of the emblems of this memorial feast in order to remember his death. And the observance of the Lord's Supper gives us a weekly reminder of Jesus' willingness to take on flesh and to shed his blood so that our sins could be forgiven. So now back to Joshua chapter 4, God instructed the Israelites to erect a memorial after the miraculous crossing of the Jordan was complete. This memorial was comprised of 12 stones representing each of the 12 tribes. And it was intended to remind the future generations of the magnificent and the miraculous way that God brought his people into the promised land. Joshua revealed the purpose of that memorial in verse 24 of chapter 4. So that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. So with that introduction, let's dig into the text here in Joshua chapter 4. If you want an outline like we've done for the previous chapters, we've got 3 groupings here in verses 1 through 9. They select 12 stones. In verses 15 through 18, we'll skip a few verses there. The ark crossed, and then children's questions, verses 19 through 24. So let's read verses 1 through 9. When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, Take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight." Then Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, "Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God in the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, what do those stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, so these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever." And the people of Israel did just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua. And they carried them over with them to the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. So something interesting here about Joshua chapter 4 is, most things that we read with a book like Joshua, where we're reading about events transpiring, things are sequential. That's not really the case with Joshua chapter 3 and Joshua chapter 4. rather than presenting new information in Joshua chapter 4, he goes back and he expands upon some things that he would have had to stop and expand upon in Joshua chapter 3. So, I think probably for like reasons of emphasis, it bears that Joshua chapter 4 goes back and says, sort of highlights the particular events related to this memorial and dives into them a little deeper. And so, that's an interesting difference here from a lot of the study that we'll go through in Joshua, is that Joshua chapter 4 really recounts some specific things that happen during Joshua chapter 3. So, and here's an example. Joshua 3:17 says, "Now the priest bearing the ark of the covenant stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan." Now then chapter 4 verse 1 begins in a very similar way. When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, and it goes into lots more detail there, but it sort of shows that chapter 4 is not a sequel to chapter 3. One significant detail in Israel's crossing of the Jordan was only mentioned in passing in chapter 3. And so without chapter 4, we wouldn't really understand. If you want to go back to verse 12 of chapter 3, there's a detail that's just sort of thrown in here, and it's not exactly clear why. But chapter 4 tells us why. Chapter 3 says in verse 12, "Now therefore take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each man a tribe." But it's not clear in chapter 3 for what purpose, right? Were they just to lead the group? Were they to be the leaders of the tribes? Were they going across individually in tribes? But then when we get to chapter 4, we know why these men that were selected out, what they were doing. That clears up the mystery. They were to each select a stone from the midst of the Jordan and carry it across to the promised land. And that's what verses 2 and 3 tell us. "Take 12 men from among the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, Take 12 stones from out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight." Then in verses 5 through 7, which we've just read, Joshua relays those additional directions to the chosen men. So the men did as Joshua instructed. They took up 12 stones from the midst of the Jordan, and they carried them over with them to the place where they lodged, and they laid them there. It's interesting that that's not the only memorial that was built on this occasion. Now, this may have stuck in your mind, but sometimes I study things and the whole story does not really stick in my mind. But in that reading, did you realize that there were 2 memorials built there? Was that clear to you? Because it didn't really stick to me. So let's go back and read that again for just a second. I can find the best spot to start here. Verse 7, he's talking to the men. He says, "You shall tell them the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it's passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people a memorial forever." Verse 8, the people did just as Joshua commanded. They set the 12 stones up. Then go to verse 9. "And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priest bearing the ark of the covenant had stood, and they are there to this day." There were 2 memorials built here. There was one of them that had to do with the stones that each one of the men from the tribe of Israel had taken across, and they brought over to the other side of the Jordan, and that was to be established. But then Joshua took 12 stones, put them where the feet of the priest had been in the midst of the Jordan, and a second memorial was built. That's interesting. So why were 2 memorials constructed in conjunction with the crossing of the Jordan? Well, we can only guess, really, but one thought would be that the first one, the one that was built on the other side of the Jordan, would have memorialized the crossing over of the Israelites. And so they could go back and see that and talk about the crossing over of the Jordan Maybe the second emphasizes the personal leadership of Joshua in the crossing. Joshua now went. So the first one had to do with one person from each tribe carrying stones and taking them to the other side, right? That's the crossing of the Israelites. Each of the tribes, each stone representing a tribe. Then Joshua builds this memorial in the Jordan itself, and maybe that had to do, since Joshua was doing it, to emphasize the leadership role that Joshua played in this event as he led the people across the Jordan. Also, certainly, he put it at the feet of the priest, what had been right there, the Ark of the Covenant, and certainly, in that memorial, a large role to the presence of God, the actual presence of God among the people, with the ark being there as those waters were being held back. So, I guess I just missed that there were two memorials built here, but I do think that is an interesting component to this. This relates back and ties back. We see a lot of this going on. We've talked about, a couple of parallels already back with Moses. But if you look at Exodus 24:4, Moses wrote down all the words of the law. He rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. Once again, some relationship to some of the things that Moses had done earlier in the journey through the wilderness. All right, let's go to verses 15 through 18. The ark crossed. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Command the priest bearing the ark of the testimony to come up out of the Jordan." So Joshua commanded the priest, "Come up out of the Jordan." And when the priest bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord came up from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priest's feet were lifted up on dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. So the text doesn't tell us how long the priest stood in the midst of the Jordan with the ark of the Lord. But from chapter 3, verses 13, 15, and 16, we know that when the soles of the feet of the priest carrying the ark touched the water, the river stopped flowing. From some of our earlier discussions, we also know that we're dealing with somewhere in the range of about 2 million people who needed to cross the Jordan. Now, as we've studied through this and we studied about the water being pushed back, this brought, at least to my mind, it says it was pushed a long way back. And when we were trying to guess where it said all the way back to the city of Adam. And we've tried to figure out, maybe to the best of our ability, where that was. And remember, we said it could have been as far as like 18 miles away. So maybe that helps you a little bit with a picture that perhaps this journey across Jordan was not a single file event, right? That they needed that broadness, because here were the priests standing there with the Ark of the Covenant, and they stood there until everybody in Israel crossed the Jordan. And so, that width that may have been needed as the ground dried up, as the waters were held back, and all those people crossed Jordan. Just think about what an amazing sight that would have been as all those people crossed over into the promised land. And so the priest standing there until everyone had crossed. Then verse 18 tells us that when the priest bearing the Ark of the Covenant came up from the midst of the water, when they lifted their feet up on dry ground, it was just like it was before. The waters returned back to flood stage, just like it was before this miracle occurred. So there's just more, even in the ending of this miracle, there is more focus on the miraculous event, that things went back just to like they were, that God provided the instructions, Joshua relayed the instructions, the priest obeyed the instructions, and it just showed God was completely in control of this event. If God could stop the waters of the Jordan and restore them at His will, He could make good on His promise to give Canaan to Israel. And additionally, God just made it more evident than ever that day that God was there with His people. But God promises to be with us today. The Great Commission, Matthew 28:18-20, he says, "Behold, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age." So the way that is manifested is different now than it was in these days, but it doesn't mean that he's any less with us than he was with the children of Israel. Hebrews 13:5 says, "Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have, for he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you." God is with us. Let's go to the last section of chapter 4. We'll call this children's questions, verses 19-24. The people came up out of the Jericho, my tongue's getting tangled today. The people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they encamped at Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. And he said to the people of Israel, "When your children ask their fathers in times to come, 'What do these stones mean?' then you shall let your children know, Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever." So at this point, Joshua gives us some important when and where information. So the when was on the 10th day of the first month, and the where was Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. So the date of this occasion was very important to the children of Israel. And if you want to know why, let's go back to Exodus chapter 12. Exodus 12. We'll start reading in verse 2. "The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, 'This month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month every man shall take a lamb according to their father's house, a lamb for a household.'" So it had been 40 years to the day from the time that the Passover occurred and the children of Israel began their journey out of Egypt to now the crossing of the Jordan. So, God, he established this date as an important date for them, the 10th day of the first month. It really marked the beginning of this redemption that he promised, and now the crossing of the Jordan to deliver to them the promise that he had given. Gilgal would become a very important place, an important religious location for Israel. So in Joshua chapter 5, the Israelites will celebrate Passover and circumcision here. In Joshua chapter 9, a sanctuary and an altar to God will be built at Gilgal. In 1 Samuel 10, Gilgal was designated as an important place for sacrifice. Samuel was talking to Saul and told him, "Go down before me to Gilgal. Behold, I'm coming down to you to offer burnt offerings and to sacrifice peace offerings." Samuel judged at Gilgal in 1 Samuel 7. Saul was made king at Gilgal in 1 Samuel 11. This was an important place, as well as being important from the time perspective. So Joshua declared the purpose for the memorial at Gilgal that comprised the stones from the riverbed. And he told the people, "When your children ask their fathers in times to come, 'What do these stones mean?' then you shall let your children know, Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over." So Joshua's insistence that this memorial would help to inform the children might bring back to you the words of Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 6, where he said, "And these words I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, shall talk of them when you sit down in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand. They shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates." So just like today, if we're not teaching our children, if we're not establishing things that bring back to mind for our children what's important in this life, the future will be very dark. It came at a time when there was, if any time in the future there was doubt about the power of God, can't you see a parent taking a child over to this memorial and telling them what it represented? That's exactly what Joshua is telling them to do. So, the memory of the Red Sea crossing was something that was stuck even in the minds of the pagans in Jericho, right? We talked about that in Jericho chapter 2. Rahab said, they're scared to death of you because they've heard what happened at the Red Sea. And now the memory of the Jordan River will be memorialized here by these stones at Gilgal. Right, they have the first-hand knowledge. Are gone. That's right. That's right. So if you didn't hear what Jim said, in terms of the crossing of the Red Sea, there's only 2 people here in this group that were first-hand participants in the crossing of the Red Sea, being Joshua and Caleb. So the mighty hand of God has worked for his people Israel. Chapter 4, verse 24 says, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. Let's talk about a couple of applications here. We'll do our best to see if we can get through all this. The first one is, and you might guess this since we're talking about memorial stones this week, reminders are important. So as subsequent generations of the Israelites needed a reminder for what God had done for the people, we need to be reminded of what God's done for us. So when we observe it properly, the Lord's Supper gives us that needed reminder today. We never need to take for granted the death of our Lord. We need to use that weekly reminder to teach our children about the wonderful love of God. As we talk about memorials, and we'll probably end here, as we talk about memorials in this lesson, are there memorials that come to your mind? Maybe you think about a headstone of a loved one somewhere in a cemetery. Or maybe you think about the Lincoln Memorial or the Washington Memorial or the 9/11 Memorial. We're people of memorials. And the reason that memorials are built is because we need reminders. We can all think about back pretty close in history now to 9/11, and we think we'll never forget about what happened on that day. We'll never forget. Yet a memorial is built, and so I haven't been up there to that memorial. I hope to someday. But when you talk to people who have gone to that memorial, it brings it back in a different way than us just thinking about it today. Now, we haven't forgotten it. It hasn't left our mind. But when you think about the seriousness of the situation and the people who lost their lives and the people who basically gave their lives on that day because they went in and did all the work to try to save lives and all the things that went on around that, when you go and you're immersed in that memorial makes that thing, it brings it back to life. And so although we say, we'll never forget this will always be fresh in our mind. We're human. And the human mind allows things to start going in the distance, and the seriousness of it and the importance of it beginning to wane. Yet memorials help us bring that back. So why do we partake of the Lord's Supper every Sunday? We talk about doing this in remembrance of Him, bringing back to memory a memorial. That's the importance of it, is that we never want to get far away from the remembrance of what Jesus did for us. And that's the seriousness of that memorial. One other thing I'll mention, and then I know we'll be out of time, is the things that Joshua says here about the memorial. You use it to remember, but you also use it to teach your children. All right, how many people have passed the plates by and not gotten questions from children? And maybe the first question is, I'm hungry and I want a cracker and some juice, right? That's the youngest, and at that point in time, there's an answer to be given. Even at that small age, there's a teachable moment. We like to talk about teachable moments, right? That's a teachable moment. Then later on, a child is like, why can't I partake? I love Jesus too, right? There's a different kind of teachable moment. But in our memorial today, just like as they talked about that memorial back in Joshua 4, there's an opportunity to teach our children. And we never need to let that opportunity go by. Memorials are for us, and they're for us to teach our children as well. So there's a little more I want to say about this. So as normal, I won't have a clean stop, but we'll stop here, and then next week we'll get into to Joshua chapter 6. We're going to skip a chapter because we got 24 chapters, and we'll never get done if we don't skip something, right? But we'll go to Joshua 6 after we finish this thought up next week. We'll talk about the destruction of Jericho. So thank you for your attention.